Hello and welcome to SquishiVision, where I have just watched Star Trek Picard Assimilation and where I've forgotten to change my background image, so I'm just gonna go and do that quickly now whilst I do my introduction. Also, for some reason, my lower thirds aren't playing, it's a bit annoying as well. Right, let's just quickly change this image. I'm gonna change it first out of the stream. Do all my checks, go see this. So I've just finished watching Picard season 2 episode 3 Assimilation, and this is my kind of immediate reaction to it. I'm not kind of, you know, scroll through the episode, picked out loads of details. Just my immediate gut reaction, well, not even gut reaction, just my immediate kind of thoughts having just watched the episode. So they fight back against the members of the Confederacy who have invaded the ship and, you know, vaporize them, but sadly Eleanor dies apparently, and there's a question of, oh well, you know, if we fix the damages to time, if we restore time, does now come back to life? And nobody really knows. Raffi is going to assume that the answer is yes, but I wonder if this means that basically they kind of wrote out the character for most of this. Well, depends how much of the miniseries is set in the past, and you know how much you have to spend on it. I imagine a couple of episodes. I mean, why else would you set it in contemporary San Francisco if you're not going to make the most of a season set in contemporary San Francisco? So I imagine we're not going to see Eleanor for a while, which is kind of convenient. The only non-human member of the team, apart from Borg Queen, who's traveled back in time, gets killed, is quite convenient. So that happens. But I mean, you know, we've also kind of written out, what's her name now? Oh, honestly, blank on her name. But yeah, Data's daughter, who was one of the main focuses and plot devices of the last season's kind of already been written out for most of it. She's probably going to return back in kind of later episodes, but she's kind of a guest star at this point. I mean, she was like main cast, I think, in the first episode, but isn't here anymore. That's just an interesting casting thing. I mean, it's not unusual for Star Trek mains to not appear in all episodes, but I guess it is unusual for them to like be written out like this, but still have like main casting. But this is, you know, new Trek. So anyway, they travel back in time. They use the slingshot maneuver that's quite famous now in Star Trek, and used effects which from memory seem very similar to the kind of, you know, elongated light effect that we've got previously. So that was, you know, cute to see, and a nice little callback. So yeah, we travel back in time. They crash land in the forest in San Francisco, but that's like, you know, who cares? And then we kind of split into the kind of A plot and B plot. The B plot is, oh well, you know, for two A plots, I think it's unfair to, well, I don't know, yeah, the B plot. So Rios, Raffi, and Seven go in San Francisco. They get teleported there. There's a bit of dark humor as the kind of very jury-rigged teleporters, you know, teleport Rios 3 stories, 3 floors above the pavement, and he falls and basically survives, but, you know, has a heck of an injury and is obviously dragged over to the hospital, which is kind of funny because, like, they literally in the previous scene are like, make sure you don't end up in hospital, that'd be bad for like the Temporal Prime Directive kind of jazz, and then he immediately ends up in hospital. I don't know if that's kind of meant to be a bit of dramatic irony, but that's what happens. So yeah, he ends up, well, he says he doesn't want to go to an A&E or doesn't want a police call, so they conveniently drag him to a nearby clinic, which kind of like deals with off the record patients, people who are like don't want to pay, or, you know, don't want the forest to be told, which is basically how healthcare works in Britain normally. America. Whereas, whilst at the same time, you know, Raffi kind of very casually disarms a mugging attempt on her and takes his money, and then they both go to the very tall building to try and scan for the alien presence. And I have more to say on this segment, so I'm going to leave it to the end. We get a very nice bit with Jurati and Picard trying to revive the queen, who's basically had like all her power, which you know, siphoned off, and just gonna kind of go into like hibernation mode because of having to like get her into the past. And so it gets really like a nice bit where she's like partially assimilated, like she plugs herself into the Borg Queen and they kind of share a mind, and like increasingly the Borg Queen kind of takes over Jurati's body. She's kind of in her body. There's a nice bit where like they're both switching between each other and both using each other's voices. It's kind of actually quite freaky. As is actually early in an episode where the Borg Queen gets released from the status cube and basically walks on her arms and hands, like basically something out of a horror film. But yeah, it was kind of, you know, it's cute because like they mentioned that because of the partial assimilation, Jurati can only communicate with her subconscious, so basically like her emotional outbursts, but nothing else, not her main conscious. And so it's kind of cute seeing how she was like dissecting which part of her brain was like free to not be used, or I couldn't quite follow, but swing on the lines, and then she kind of like speaking, you know, sadly, or speaking like a child, or speaking angrily, and there's kind of a very dark moment about depression, which is actually depicted quite accurately, about how, you know, you just feel very overwhelmed. Sometimes you just want to like lie down, go to sleep, and not wake up, and, you know, big mood. I feel that. That's me every day. That's pretty decent kind of depiction of what depression's about. So I'm all there for that. Not all there for depression, but all there for, you know, accurate depictions of mental health in media. And then, yeah, Picard kind of pulls her out just at the last minute, but apparently it's enough, and the Borg Queen comes alive, and the Borg Queen's like, well, if you want me to tell you where the Watcher is, you gotta give me a ship. And then Jurati's like, ha, you don't know where the Watcher is, because I nicked that information from you while I was in your brain. And she's like, damn, you did. And now I've got my, and then, you know, nice little twist at the end where the Borg Queen's like, well, that was a mistake, because now I'm interested in you. And, you know, she gives a very creepy smile. I think it's actually the scene that the image behind me is. So yeah, that happens. So yeah, and then yeah, so the 2022 segments, nothing much happens in the plot. Rios is kind of semi-flirting with a Hispanic doctor at the clinic about his injuries. And I do have to wonder, you know, obviously futuristic healthcare in Star Trek seems super advanced, and like a lot of things can be healed quite easily. I'm unsure of how much that requires early intervention, because like if you've broken your fingers and you don't get Starfleet care, even though you've got modern 21st century care, is that still going to have like my finger here is still like slightly, I don't know if you can see it, just that finger there, slightly bent forward because I punched a chair during an audition piece once, so it went, and I've got too much in character, and I kind of bent it, and I had to get like I had to do like a cast on it for like a couple of months, but like it's never quite got, if it's fully functional, like it's no, I'm not like, you know, it's not causing any disability, but that's permanently like malformed. So you got to wonder if he doesn't get Starfleet healthcare, is he gonna? But that's just me, you know, nerd pondering about things not relevant to the episode. But yeah, my main kind of, they didn't waste any time, because this is, like I've said in previous episodes, for me as a viewer, having been born in 1995 and not really having got into Star Trek until about 2009, and then, you know, then I was watching repeats on CBS Action, I think, or some channel like that. This is the first time I've watched contemporary Star Trek set in a contemporary age. Like, the episode is set now. I mean, it's set 2 years in the future, but hey, that's close enough to now. And, you know, they did not hesitate to kind of go into the commentary about, like, it sucks. Things suck. There's, you know, the first commentary they make is about how they you know, capitalist powers like to yell about messages of welfare and peace and prosperity and all that jazz, and then literally at their feet are people in poverty. Like, that's literally straight off the bat. And then we get like a kind of a whole ecology point about fires and global, and, you know, pollution and the air becoming toxic. Things all consistent with Star Trek canon, I should add. And, you know, I hope they, and we get the police. we get three. Oh, I'm glad of this. We get three white officers arresting a Hispanic Hispanic patient, and it's clearly a race thing. Like, come on, it's can't not be a race thing. So we're getting Star Trek's going full on 2024 ACAB, reform everything, and I am living for it. And I've said, a lot of people have come to how modern Star Trek is, darker. It's more political. Yeah. It's too on the nose. I mean, firstly, Star Trek's always been political. I have a theory. I mean, I can't substantiate this because I didn't live through the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s. But I have a theory that we could get away with more subtle politics in previous, because even subtle political messages in early media was like edgy. That was like breaking boundaries. And that was groundbreaking, and it wasn't enough. And now people who write TV shows are like, screw subtlety. We have to tell people messages, because if we don't, and we see it happening. We see whenever I see pieces of science fiction that has a leftist slant to it, and it's like they put messages in that are subtle. People just miss the point. People just completely miss the point every time. You see it happening in Star Trek in the 90s when they've done subtle political things. People have completely missed the point that it's political. So I absolutely think that Star Trek needs to be through and through overt with its political tones, because people are going to miss the point otherwise. And so and I think also edition very much for a 2022 audience. We need on the nose political messages, and I think that's what Star Trek's been. Star Trek's always been, written for the contemporary audience of the time, as opposed to the contemporary audience of the past. The audience of the time, and the audience of the time today need these things if they told them explicitly. And we get a whole bunch of quotes. How can we live in a world with so many contradictions, where we have, so many welfare things? We're happy to enable capitalist norms, and we've got all this charity, but we're happy to all these contradictions out of society. And it's all Star Trek's always been about. And anyone who complains about this episode and any future episodes being too political or just talking out of their backside, it's just being a bit more overt, because it has to be. And I'm absolutely looking forward to the next few episodes. It's ripping apart institutions, ripping apart capitalism, ripping apart inequality, ripping apart institutions like the police. And if it doesn't do that, it's an absolute missed opportunity. So yeah, that was my thoughts on this episode of Star Trek Picard. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and I am going to do things. I'm gonna set up some streams, because I have a backlog of trailers I need to do some reaction videos to. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna do reactions to okay, go on. So the stream's up yet. I don't know when I'm gonna start. I need to clear up my plates and get the thumbnails ready and sort of other stuff. So once that's done, yeah, let's look at the show. I floundered at that ending